Well,
I haven't gone yet.
There's a couple of
Tony?
folks that haven't gone yet. So.
A lot of people haven't gone yet.
All right, that's fine. So welcome everybody.
Wait, Candace has her hand up.
Are we
Go ahead,
gonna,
Candace.
what time are we officially starting the meeting?
9:14.
Okay. And everyone is here? Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Nick.
All right, so welcome everybody who's officially joining us live. We are discussing hobbies recently as an introductory icebreaker. And so I was gonna reference somebody else's hobby. I do miss UFC, watching that, but I can't take credit for that one. That's a good one. You know, the word hobby is interesting. I think it's like, I don't know what the word for it is, but I feel like it kind of devalues culture, because if you do something regularly and it's part of your custom, your habit, and it's part of your culture. So growing up, I read a lot of comics, and comic books are a part of pop culture and culture, I think in a larger sense, and they come from culture too, and they need more culture. And so it's becoming more diverse now. And so I haven't really read comic books in a long time, the way I used to growing up, just with college and everything, and being a teacher and looking at literacy and using that in the classroom. A lot of my students keep me on point by updating me now. Not only makes me feel old, but also reminds me that as somebody who is older, we can't be judging people on what they're reading or digesting in terms of media, because we all take it in. And even with this era of fake news, we're being very mindful of what we're hearing and seeing. So where the truth is stranger than fiction, I should say that I've needed more fiction in my life just to balance things out. And so with everything on, you know, via Netflix or, you know, anything streaming, I feel like it's been refreshing to read comic books. And comic books are actually very well written. They're very well edited. And I learned a lot of vocabulary, exactly. So like, those are actually becoming a tool in literacy, and events like the Comic-Con in San Diego are often having more and more panels about literacy, and I've often involved educators. So I would encourage everybody, as a quick plug, to check out Comic-Con at Home 2020. All of it's free online. They have a lot of panels that are focused on education and integrating education in the sense of equity. And on that note, doing my homework was actually going back and reading some of the comics that shows our youth are watching now, and just everybody are based on. So that is my current hobby, although I would say that's like all of our habits, part of our culture. So yeah, and I'll pass it to whoever else is next. I don't know who else is left.
You can pick whoever you want, Nick. You can pick a student. You can pick Nicole. You can pick Candace, Tony, or me.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gloria. I will pass it to Nicole Anderson.
All right, well, I didn't follow directions, Dr. Deloria, and put my answer in the chat. However, my new hobby was paint and sip, and actually I've done it a few times with adults, and actually had some really good products come out of that, to the point I thought I could go sell them to people. I was asking folks, would you buy this if you saw this in the store? But my canvas paintings have been fun, and so our kids actually really enjoy that. And obviously paint and sip is usually for adults, because you have, you know, like wine or something like that. So our kids decided to, we were supposed to go to Hawaii this summer, and of course, you know, that got canceled. So they decided to make their own kid version of these tropical drinks with juice and all these things. And they tried to find some little umbrellas and put their straws in. And so it's just fun to do that. That was a really nice bonding experience with our 7, 13, and 17-year-old and my husband. So that was fun. That was a really great one. One day I'll share pictures with you all and show you what great artists we've become. And do I pick someone?
Yes, please.
All right. I may have lost track, but I want to pick a student, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And of course, I only see names. Is Mustafa a student?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Mustafa, and I just was intrigued by saying your last name correctly. So can you please make sure you say it correctly for me, because I want to say it right. So Mustafa.
Abu Zahriya.
Say it one more time.
Abu Zahriya.
Abu Setria.
No, I don't think you'll get it correctly over Zoom. So I'm just going to say.
I'm going to keep trying though. I'm going to keep trying. All right. Go ahead,
Up,
Mustafa.
Maria.
What about you?
So my name is Mustafa. I'm a student trustee. I haven't taken up any new hobbies. But I have tried to play video games in my free time. But now it's just kind of overwhelming with all that screen time. So I think I'm playing less. Um, I don't know. I try to start new hobbies but they end up dying off. Like my family, we used to go for walks in the afternoon, but then like sometimes we just get lazy. Or like now, like with inconsistent air quality, and like we're all kind of busy now. It's like hard to find time. And then I also wanted to try to learn how to write with my left hand, but like it's just also hard to find time to like practice that. So I think that's it. I'll pass it on to Madeline.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Madeline, and I'm also a trustee. I started baking since March. I'll just bake anything. I love baking banana bread and giving it to my neighbors. I also started meditating in the mornings. It really calms me down, and my best experience with meditating was actually when the sky was red. For some reason, it was very calming to me. And I'll call on Luca.
Thank you, Madeline. Luca?
Luca, if you want to type it into the chat, that works. You put it in the chat. There you go.
Luca said, my name is Luca Garcia. I'm a trustee, and a new hobby is watching movies with my family.
Great. Luca, do you want to pick either Candace, Tony, or me? Candace.
Good morning, everyone. Some of you, well, most of you probably don't know, but I love to draw, and I'm very good. I am. I'm just going to toot my own horn there. But with that, I have started trying to take what I can do in my hands and make it digital. So I am learning Photoshop, and I am loving it. I stayed up till about 1:30, 2 o'clock this morning, just fiddling around with it. And it's addictive, but I love it. So that's kind of my new hobby. Yeah, that's really it. That's really it.
Tony, make note of that. That'll come in awfully handy.
And I will call on Dr. D.
Thank you. So I'm Dr. D. I'm going to try to facilitate the workshop today. It's a pretty ambitious agenda, but I'm confident you can all do it. So if you don't know me, we're a real nerdy family. Comic books, all the way. Anything Marvel, all the way. But there were some times, we're a Star Trek family. But when the kids were really, we watched Star Trek a lot, like Next Generation. When the kids were little, it was easy. We never missed an episode. But when they got involved in high school, it became more difficult to watch some of the spin-offs. So right now I'm going through the Voyager. I already saw Enterprise. Now I'm going through the Voyager series, trying to catch up on those series that I wasn't able to watch because, Dave and I were busy at basketball games and swim meets and stuff like that. And Tony, you're going to bring us home.
Hi everyone, I'm Tony Preston. I'm the Associate Soup of HR, and when Dr. Deloria retires, I'll be superintendent. So I'm participating in that capacity today. And the hobby that I've taken back is gardening. So I used to live for many, many years. I lived in a garden apartment in Bernal Heights in the city, and I had pots everywhere. And I, every weekend planted and cut. It's super, it's kind of zen to just trim the plants and things like that. So I live in a house now, and I thought once I moved to a house, I would just plant all the time. And but I had a baby, so I didn't plant all the time. So over the years, I've done some planting, but being at home, primarily at home since March, I have done lots and lots of gardening, planting new plants and just kind of revitalizing things. And it's very calming, and it's nice to just be outside in nature. So that's what I've been doing.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing that.
So really quickly, before we do this, we need to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Awesome. Can I get a motion to approve consent unless anyone wants to pull?
Move to approve consent.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment for today.
Fantastic. Turning it back over to Dr. Deloria.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see kind of the facilitated agenda. Can someone give me a thumbs up? You can see it. All right, thank you. So we do have new people in the room, so I wanted to start with a little bit of a summary. A couple of years ago, Kalima and Andy participated in the California School Board Association's Equity Network. And from that, and there were a couple of times when superintendents were invited. From that, we started an equity task force in our district. We wanted to bring together a group of people who were eager to move our equity work forward. And part of the work, and thank you to Nicole for this, one of the assignments for boards was to come up with an equity statement and then to develop an equity policy. And so what happened last year, and actually we've been doing some work for a while, but there was a subcommittee of our district equity task force led by two of our principals, Danny and Keisha. And I asked them to come up with some equity statements for consideration by the board. And that includes the student trustees. So what you see here on number 2 are the results of that work of that subcommittee. And in your homework, I asked you to become familiar with them. It's my recommendation that adult and student trustees take a look at this and either select one or meld a couple together or revise, or however you want to do that. And I'm going to do my very best to capture your notes so that we can have some agreement before we go on to number 3. Kalima or Andy, anything you want to add to that? Because you were part of the equity network.
Yeah, I think that was a good. I think that's a good summary. I mean, we've been doing the work for a couple of years now. You know, so you know, we're definitely on. We're you know, now personalizing the work even more, and trying to put this in a context where this then becomes embedded as part of our culture and who we are as a district. So it's good that we've done we continue to do the individual work of individual change, but now it's about taking that and making it something that we can make actionable for us as a district.
Thank you, Andy. And what I should have added is the why. Why are we doing this? We want to get to a place where we can refer back to our equity policy when we're making decisions about goals, allocation of resources, and things like that. Kalima, is there anything you wanted to add?
About the equity statement or about the equity work?
Either. Maybe the equity work first, and then we can just jump into thoughts about the equity statement.
So for me, the equity work is, one of the jokes I say to myself all the time is, I can't fix America, right? Anytime something happens, the kids and I joke, we can't fix America. It could be anything, but that's what we say. But this is how we do fix America, right? This is how we do fix the things that are historically built into the framework of this country that have caused and perpetuated systemic inequity in certain subgroups for generations. And so the issues that we're going to talk about here are going to be the same issues that my mother dealt with in school, that I dealt with in school, that my kids dealt with in school. And I really would like to not have my kids' kids have to deal with the same issues in school. So what can we do as a district to be what I would like to see in America? And that's what I hope that this day does for us here, starting that conversation. And that all needs to start with a foundation and a belief that we base our framework in. And I'm hoping that that's going to be our equity statement.
Well said, Kalima, thank you. So I know this is awkward doing this virtually, but I'd like to open it up to feedback from people, whether you, and this is everybody in the room. So is there one that you're leading to, or do you think a statement should be revised, added to, the union of a couple of them? So I'm just opening up to the floor. You don't have to raise your hand, just go ahead and talk. Go ahead,
I'll
Carl.
start. Can I start? May I start?
Yeah.
I was actually really impressed with all three. There were shades of differences, but I think all three were really good. I personally liked statement 3 the most because I think it was the strongest. I also liked statement 2. I could see maybe melding them, but if I were just to vote, I think statement 3 is good as is. And I could talk more about why, but if we're just sort of voting.
I'm keeping notes. I can't see everybody, so if someone else wants to weigh in, go ahead.
Well, I'll just add on to that, since Tony said that, that I agree with her too on like maybe incorporating number 2 and number 3, because I feel like that really, number 2 and number 3 really kind of speaks to what we, what we want to be and what we strive to be. But let me grab the, it's hard to see on the screen, the statement. But, just like the last statement for number 2, where it just says, and intentionally uses our educational system to right historical equities. I think that's definitely something that we are, actively trying to do, as well as number 3. So if we can kind of add that in or incorporate it in there, I think that would be really great.
Thank you, Carla.
Can I say something?
Yes, of course.
So I agree. I think that they all get the same message across, but statement 3 is the most cohesive. But I do also agree with that the last statement or the last part of statement 2 is important. So if we could find a way to incorporate it into statement 3 that works with like the structure of the sentence, that would be a good thing. So if I were to personally vote, or like, I don't know if I have a vote in this, but like, I think statement 3 is the best one.
Thank you, Mustafa.
Yeah, to add to that, looking at all these, I think they do kind of echo each other, but in different kinds of terms, but the structure is very similar, right? So you have just looking at one of the reasons why statement 3, I think, is comprehensive and feels that way is because it uses a lot of verbs, right? So the words and the language we're using is embrace, value, prepare, and then committed to engage, educate, and empower, and then of course with all, of our students. And so all of these statements end in a sense of inclusion, If you look at the last part of each statement, the first in statement 1, you have each student with every resource in the second to last line. In statement 2, in bold, you see inclusion in our diverse community, and so forth. And then in statement 3, you have in all caps, you have all students, with special attention to, of course, all students. And so in the sense of inclusion and inequity and civil rights, and we see this in equal opportunity statements all the time, affirmative action clauses essentially, and in just legal language. These statements all have that at the end, but the difference to me in each of them is how we phrase the first part in terms of which verbs and which words we're using to frame our actions. And so I think if I, off top, I would say statement 3 is probably the one that I would go with first, but I think given the input from those who put into statement 1 and 2, those can be used too, some of those words, some of that language, if people want to wordsmith it, which is what we're doing, right? I would encourage that because I think all the statements bring something to the table, but statement 3 feels the most comprehensive for those reasons, because I think it has the best balance of those two. But we can definitely, mix and match.
Thanks, Nick. I did slide something in. Rosie, I can't see your face right now, but you're usually really good at editing and rewriting. So I made a first attempt. Feel free to go in there and if you can find a better place for it.
Terry, what did you change? I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
She bolded it.
So I bolded it in number 2, but then I cut it, or I copied it and I inserted it into number 3.
Okay, because it says the word inequities it's maybe redundant if we read it all the way through, because there is a statement about racial inequities a little bit further down.
That's why I called on Rosie. Yeah. She's really good at that.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Tiffany.
How will the statement be used?
I can go first, but board members jump in anytime. Certainly it should be part of our equity policy. I think it should probably be the preamble to our equity policy. I think it should definitely be used in all of our media, much the same as districts talk about their mission and vision. I think it should be part of our board agenda, and we should, whenever we're making decisions, I think we need to come back to this. Whether it's a budget decision, a resource, any kind of resource decision, decisions about revising our policies and regulations.
Yeah, Tiffany, I think for me, it's a reminder to me that if I have this open on my screen as we have our meetings, this would be something that will continue to remind me of the lens I have to take with every agenda item.
Yeah, that's helpful. It'll be kind of like your guiding light.
And there is a way for the board agenda. There's a part of the board agenda that you can connect an item to a goal or a vision, and we could do the same thing with this. Like, how does a particular board item relate to our equity policy?
This is Nicole. If I can contribute one thought too, I'd really appreciate seeing the work being done. Just want to acknowledge you for that. Very powerful. And I was sending a few texts to other board members like, hey, you may want to pay attention to the work they're doing on this Saturday, right? This is important work. And so I love what you all have shared about, like, how do you use it? Appreciate that question from Tiffany. And also just want to add, this is a way to look at, measuring your success, right? So when you make decisions, is equity happening? And what is equity? Well, here's our statement. And so I say that also to say, as you're continuously, wanting to make edits, that you think about, can I measure this? So when you're breaking down the words, I think Nick was talking about like the words themselves. A lot of times you'll have opportunities to take those words. Can I measure what this means. And so as you're continuously wordsmithing, think about that. Is this something we can measure over time? And also the other piece is, as you're making decisions, this is also a way to help prioritize your work. So as things come up, it helps you to really, again, prioritize what is the governance team spend its time on. Are there operational things that come up, things that really don't impact students based on what you're putting here in your statement? And so I always use examples of, landscaping, right? And no, not to disrespect that as a very important piece of facility work, but the reality is that sometimes we have to figure, okay, is landscaping, like someone, in the community may be very adamant about, the trees and the landscaping of a school. And so there are going to be times that as a governance team, you'll have to prioritize your work and say, okay, is this part of our equity statement? Is this going to be a part of our prioritization of our work? And if it's not, your community has to see that our priority is equity. And that, yes, we're going to make sure facilities is obviously, if it has to do with addressing the needs of kids and it has to do with the experiences of kids, then absolutely. But if it doesn't, then it just helps you prioritize the work and also communicate to your community about the why of your governance work, knowing that there's a lot you can do, but you want to really prioritize the work to ensure that this statement actually happens. So I just wanted to contribute that as you continue to go through your process, which I really appreciate.
Thank you, Nicole.
Just to add, and thank you for pointing it out, Nicole. I think it's really important, and people have mentioned this and often mention this, is that when we're thinking about what we're doing as a district and setting priorities as a board, our LCAP, not the new LCAP, the not LCAP, our COVID-19 response, but the actual LCAP, the budget, that states our priorities. And so in terms of measurability and metrics, while this statement, like Nicole was saying, the why is elemental to what we're doing, the how, I think we can always add more to the language, but it might get detailed to the point where it gets away from where the mission and vision statement essence of what it is won't get lost, but it will get a lot more wordy. And so keeping that in mind, I think like what Dr. Delory was saying, and certainly what a lot of the board has been saying is in terms of our priorities, seeing that it mirrors and guides our LCAP and what we're doing, I think the detail will be embedded in that. And so focusing on the why here is probably the core of what we're doing. At least that's my intention in reading this too, but yeah.
I like what you said there, Nick. And as I'm sort of looking at what's currently being edited for statement 3, that bolded statement, desires to intentionally use our educational systems to right historical inequities, to me is probably the most important sentence in the statement. Mm-hmm. Because we recognize the question that Nicole has shared with us many times, right? Can a system founded on inequity be trusted to fix itself? And what we're saying is we recognize the inequity of our educational system and we are going to use it to fix inequity. And that commitment is really a powerful statement.
So I would just add that we need to add current and historical inequities, because so many people think that inequities are something that was like in history, and there are current inequities that are happening right now. And then the other word that I would add is so special attention to those. I would take out historically, because it's not historical. It's still happening right now. We're still underserved, disenfranchised. So we have the historic up top. And then the other thing I would add is underserved, inadequately served. Because a lot of times we throw a lot of resources at something and say that we're serving them, but it's completely inadequate. It's not what the community needs, but we don't take the time to look into that. So a lot of the work that we've done previously to close the opportunity gap has been really inadequate.
think that's a great idea, President Sullivan. I think oftentimes the word we see is disadvantaged or underrepresented. But when it comes to public education, the K through 12 level, we are represented. It's about providing the resources. And so I think that's a really good way of framing both in a way that we understand that people are here and represented, but they're not being served. And in terms of being disadvantaged, we are being disenfranchised because there are inequities built into historical tracking, right? Public education and in the separation of general and special education and all those things. And so that is a really good point. At higher education, we are underrepresented in many ways, but this is our statement for K through 12, especially at the high school level, right? And so underrepresentation is real in higher education in terms of graduation rates and all that too. But unless you want to address that, I think that would do well. I think this would do.
Kalima, what do you think about using the word under-resourced? I try to stay away from underserved because we have a lot of staff who think they're doing right by students, are working really hard, and they would say they're serving some of our the at-risk or historically ignored groups. And so by saying under-resourced, that's whether it's internal or external. I'd like to get away from the word served, I guess. That might just be a personal.
I mean, I do feel like our students are underserved. I mean, I do feel they are not getting the same level of service as other students.
Okay.
But that's just me. So I like the word underserved and then putting it and inadequately served, because I do think it's part of service. And then the other thing about resources is anytime you put resources in, then that's an excuse for people not to do something, especially here when finance is always an issue. I mean, we're always going to have a problem with resources. Because this statement is more about what we're doing as a district, not so much the community is under-resourced. I mean, if it was about the community being under-resourced, or if we're talking about things that the community needs to be doing in descriptives, then I would say, okay, we need to think about how certain parts of our community are under-resourced. But this is, to me, what we're doing in regards to our students. So I would not use the term under-resourced in speaking about the district. Not saying we aren't, but we totally are, but that's not an excuse not to do any of this stuff.
I wonder if you, I agree with you actually. I wonder if you need to, I think under and inadequately served kind of mean the same thing, but we hear the word underserved a lot, so we kind of can gloss over it. So I kind of like that you've called out inadequately served. But I wonder if we just say those inadequately served. Do you see a difference between underserved and inadequately served?
I agree. Underserved is overused and people gloss right over it.
Like, I like your word inadequately served because it's different. It calls people to, yeah, it calls people to that. I kind of see them as the same though.
So to me they're two different things. Underserved is we just aren't, like, we are not teaching a full curriculum in terms of cultural reflectiveness. So that's underserving the community. Inadequately served is when we have a program that's supposed to be for foster students. We put a bunch of money in it and it doesn't do anything for the foster students. But we're saying we've done this. We created this program.
I got you. So it's not served enough and then not served well, sort of like
exactly
quantity versus quality.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Can I offer a question and then a thought about that? Just like contextually, I wonder, where the word underserved originally came from. Like, why was that word selected? And what I wonder is if it's when we try to change the wording, which we also use quite a lot, is underperforming. And so a lot of times that's where the word underserved came from, because we're talking about a power structure of, it's not the kids who are the deficit, right? It's more of power structures that are not serving well, which I recall that was kind of the original kind of shift from underperforming to, excuse me, underperforming to underserved, which spoke about the achievement gap, right? And so it was really changing the language to call out that kids actually are, asset-based, but that in the system, and as people, we are not serving them based on what their needs are.
Yeah.
And then I think the other piece was when you all referred to, gosh, what did you just say? You all referred to another word that now you're wordsmithing. I just lost it. But I wanted to make sure you had some context around power structure. I think that's going to be important to call that out, and that the reality is that when you're talking about an equity statement, the resource piece, and that's what it was, is how you allocate your resources, and resources should be called out and define what that is, because it's not always going to be about funding. It's going to be about, time. It's going to be about human capital. And it's also going to be about quality, I think was mentioned as well, of services. So just want to give context and just, where that may have come from in terms of the shift in language.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
For when we say culturally responsive, do you think we could change responsive to proactive? To me, like responsive, like indicates like a more reactionary way of taking like action or inciting change. When I think we want to be a district that sort of leads the way in equity, just as like a standard and not something we do just because of social outcry or upheaval.
Woo, yes, thank you.
Can you point out where you're talking about that so I can make a note about that?
The second line in statement 3.
Okay, so say it again for me.
Change responsive to proactive. Also, I had one more thing for statement 2. I know we're like focusing on statement 3, but I do like the part where it says we respect disparate viewpoints, because I feel like in order to make a change, you have to be working with like people who don't see eye to eye on you, because maybe sometimes people with different viewpoints have like maybe like their viewpoints are a little uneducated, and you have to be willing to educate people to sort of, because I think ignorance plays a lot into why there's so much inequity in society. So if we could like incorporate like, oh yeah, there. Thank you.
I agree with that, actually. Anybody else?
Well, this is great.
Great point. Word proactive, I think, does change the tone up front about the statement 2 a lot, and that's a really good catch. I think on that note too, the word confront or address, I think confront would be a better word if we're looking at respect, given just where we are as a society globally, right? And we talk about hard conversations and whatnot. We confront things within ourselves. So the word confront seems confrontational, right, at a glance, but that's part of the problem on our planet, right? Is that we confront things. And so if we're gonna balance that out in a way that I think provides the proactive, a way to lean in and lean forward on these conversations and redress instead of just address, then the action comes with confrontation, which is not always negative. So yeah, I think it comes together pretty well. I don't know what y'all think.
Thanks, Nick. I put that in there because I felt the same way. I think confront, address kind of sounds like it's much more passive. So I put that in there and I agree.
Could also be interrupt, confront and interrupt.
Yes, please.
I like that.
Are we adding that?
Where am I going to add interrupt?
Where it's already, the cursor was there.
Okay.
Prepare ourselves to confront and interrupt.
Okay.
And then I think just thinking about the initial question that I had posed around like how this will be used in the response of like, this will be like our lens when we make decisions. I feel like that should be called out. Like, I agree with what everybody has said about the intentionally use our educational systems to right current historical or current or historical inequities. And I think there should be something around like doing everything in our power to understand how our decisions either like reinforce or interrupt those inequities. Because that's almost like as a board, that's what you'll have to be thinking about. Like, I'm going to approve this or, not. And what is that going to be based on? Because it's either reinforcing the achievement gap or, students of color, but really being able to see how the decisions impact the larger picture.
I hear what you're saying. I'm open to hearing some language about that. As a math teacher, I'm not always the best writer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure I spelled interrupt right.
Tiffany, you said a sentence that seemed actually well-formed. Do you remember exactly what you said? Sometimes when we're just thinking, but your sentence was good.
To inform, or just something to add that says will inform all our decision-making.
Something like this.
Okay.
Those are just some really raw thoughts. But I think maybe this is the part. Oh, maybe it's here. To intentionally use our educational systems to right current and historical inequities by.
Yeah.
I don't know, is everybody okay with that though? Or we're just kind of drafting all of it in the moment?
Let's put it in just to see what it looks like, and we can probably re-edit that.
Tony, you're on mute. I know.
I said all the important stuff right there. The writer in me wants to find a different word to just not use the word inequity 3 times. I mean, frankly, maybe inequity is just the best word, but I think of injustice, trying to think of just so we're not redundant in the statement. So I like that. And we use the word inequity 3 times, which maybe that's okay, but it jumps out at me as the writer, like you want to not repeat the same word.
I like the word injustice, where Tiffany has inequity.
Yeah.
I like using injustice.
Okay.
It's a good substitute. Anybody else? I can't see faces and body languages, so I'm just gonna go ahead.
Well, let's just try it and see and see. My only concern with that first sentence is that it's really, really long.
It is long.
But the point being made is the most important point to set the tone.
So we can include, or we did include, statement 2 has already been included in statement 3. Okay, you're starting with, got it.
So should we take that first sentence and do it more like in a triple to understand,
Well, like 3 bullets. I almost think you want to start with this sentence.
not in bullets, but I'm not explaining myself very well.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
Like listing 3 actions, because I don't know how to do it. Not without even thinking about it.
There's almost like a few different kind of components to statement 3, right? There's like the commitment, like we're committed to this, but then there's also the hows of like by embracing inclusion, diversity, by seeking to understand our community, by engaging, educating, empowering all students. I feel like this should be like, you start off with that really strong.
I agree.
Yeah, the JUH, yeah, because so yeah, the JUHD continuously seeks to intentionally use our educational system to write right. Yeah, I agree too.
I even think if you just say JUHSD will intentionally use our educational systems to write current, you know, like just that's super strong.
Or uses, not even will, like it's present.
Or uses, yeah, exactly. And then put the first sentence kind of after.
Do you want to try it? Go for it, Mustafa.
So for me, since I guess in essay writing at school, they try to make us avoid like shorter sentences. I don't find a problem with this length of the sentence, but I think with like an equity statement, I think it might be more impactful to like break it down because like the reader could have like an easier time like breaking down what each sentence really means and like understand the goal of our district. So yeah, but I also do agree with the use of active voice instead of passive voice. So using the word use would be better.
So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and go ahead and do that and just then uses our educational system. So does it our education systems? Okay, you're right.
I like that.
Yeah, so do I. That's far more direct.
Should we put it how our decision making reinforces?
Yeah. Should be understanding, examining.
How our decision making. Yes.
Well, that is one powerful sentence.
Yes, I actually like it with the other things out because I think you can't all the stuff that was in that sentence we have to do in order to do the first sentence.
Yeah.
So I just think
and what about rather than saying by understanding / examining, because I think those are two different things.
Understanding and
what about saying his uses our educational systems to write current and historical inequities by examining and understanding how our decision making. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I don't think the intent was to leave the slash in there, so.
Yes, I like that.
Examining and understanding. Yeah. How our decision making reinforces or interrupts injustices. Yes. We embrace inclusion, value diversity.
That pretty much embraces my understanding of the history of education right there. Right? You can either support the injustice or do something to interrupt it.
I love this.
Yeah, I do too. Hey, Tiffany, the part that you cut out, can you like paste it below so we can so I can just make sure that there's not some great thing that we didn't put in here?
Yes, good point.
Because the only thing that I remember really continuously seeks to understand our community. So the only thing that I think we may want to still have captured there is that this is a continuous process, that this is something that it may be implied and we maybe don't need it, but
I think if it's saying we uses our education, that doesn't end.
I got you. Yeah.
I
agree.
Because if you say continually seeks, it almost sounds like a cop-out, you know?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
We, you know, that's what we're planning to do, but don't blame us if it doesn't happen.
We're always trying to, I got you. I agree. Okay.
I'm wondering if, is injustice too broad?
I was gonna say that word, it's a great word. I was thinking in terms of grammar too. Should we say social injustice, which is even the same like level of general, right? Or should we injustice itself, which is also general? We could get more detailed, but it looks like we do that in the rest of the language. So I wasn't sure if we wanted to. And the other just editing detail is decision making has a dash between decision and making.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those are my questions too.
I was thinking about that because if we needed to add like social and cultural injustice here, but then we go into the descriptive of the injustice because of what we're confronting and interrupting. So I feel like it's there, but that's just my opinion.
I like injustice, but I like it.
This becomes the
I like
preamble for the
injustice, and
policy, so the policy can explain more.
Yeah, I think it should just be injustice because it encompasses everything, and we don't want to limit ourselves. I think a descriptor could potentially limit what it is, and we want to really incorporate all of it.
Well, I think
like-
where I was thinking, oh, go ahead, Rosie.
No, and I was just going to agree that, it's delineated in the following sentence what the injustices are.
I was thinking about, I think somewhere in our homework from Terry that you had sent out, you had referenced kind of the CSBA's equity statement, and something in there was specifically about like, where was it? It was on eliminating the disparities in educational outcomes. And I was almost thinking, do you all want to call that out here as opposed to like injustice at large, but actually what you all have an influence in, which is the not only influence, but also impact in terms of like educational, like you all either reinforce or interrupt the educational disparities.
So just add injustice, and then you want to put like in educational outcomes or in educational.
Yeah, she has it highlighted in our board policy. So eliminate disparities in educational outcomes. Is that what you're talking about, Tiffany?
I think so.
Let me know Nick is there. I'm gonna copy it and put it back below just so you can all see what
I wrote that. I just wrote eliminate disparities in educational outcomes. Oh, okay, cool.
Just a thought.
So
is the thought to maybe,
well, because here it's understanding how our decision making reinforces or interrupts.
but could it go in the second sentence?
Well, I would just, because I'm like, if we put educational outcomes there.
Or maybe we just move this part up.
Yeah.
Up until interrupts social, political, economic, and racial inequities.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, Khalima, I think we're seeing the same thing as, because we use our educational systems to write the current historical inequities, which kind of includes the educational outcomes. But we want to be explicit about the language. So I was wondering where we were already saying that too, and if we just want to take educational outcomes, because we're talking about disparity.
Wait, where are we? Okay, I see.
Is that what you wanted to do? Like that?
Let me see.
I'm not seeing, it looks like something just disappeared to me, but
what did you, the word injustice.
But
yeah,
it looks like a sentence is gone.
I think Terry just moved the second half of the second sentence to the first sentence.
This is what it was. And then this is what I did.
Yeah.
It's okay to tell me if that's not what you want.
No, it's fine. I just need to.
Now we need to fix this.
I didn't track that, sorry.
Now it's kind of a lot, huh? Now it's kind of long. I think you kind of lose the.
Yeah, I liked it the other way, but
I liked it the other way, I think.
Okay.
But that's just me. That's just me.
I agree. That first sentence to me is still really powerful.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you still want to like include the word proactive somewhere, or do you think just the use of the present tense implies a proactive response?
I
To
think
me, using that's what I was trying to use, all current, present tense, and really calling out current and historical is being the proactive, using a proactive lens. But we can add it somewhere if you.
I like the present tense. The word proactive that's another one of those words that gets used an awful lot in the literature.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry it just gets glossed over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's very true. Mustafa, the more you read policy, the more you'll see it, at least in terms of like corporate responsibility, language, proactive gets thrown around a lot. Although it's always a word that I like using because I think it has some resonance, especially for our community, because I think proactive is a very positive and forward-leaning word. And so I do like the word, and if we can use it, I think we should use it. But the present tense that you were referring to, and a lot of folks were referring to, also carries that energy. So I'm wondering if there's a place for that in the language that we can use.
But I think that saying JUHSD uses, it is a promise.
Yeah, it's very strong.
And a commitment. And it's a commitment. If you say JUHSD will be proactive, it's less strong. And unfortunately, proactive used to be a great word until people kept using it.
Exactly.
Over and over. And then it lost its power. But here, we're not saying we'll continuously seek. We're saying we use our educational system. That's a promise. This is what we believe in. And that's where the power comes from, being extremely active in our verbs.
So I agree, but then like I was also thinking like you don't have to say will be proactive. You could change proactive into an adverb and add it before uses. Proactive, like you just see proactively uses like right in the beginning, but to me it doesn't really matter because I think active voice implies a proactive response.
Right.
I'm glad you're lending your thoughts, Mustafa. You have a lot of really good thoughts. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth about proactively. I think it's good either way.
Yeah, if we're kind of saying it's good either way, then I'm always like the less words the better because people don't read.
Yeah. Hey, may I make another 2 comments? I put them on the side. I think we should maybe delete prepare ourselves too. So if you read the sentence, we embrace inclusion, value diversity, respect disparate viewpoints, and prepare ourselves to confront and interrupt. I just think we should say and confront and interrupt systemic social.
I don't agree, and this is why.
Okay.
I haven't seen anybody do this well without training.
Without what?
Training. I haven't seen anybody do anything regarding confronting or interrupting systemic and racial injustice without training. And a lot of people think they're able to just do that and claim that they can do it. And I'm like, you're not doing it. You need to be okay with getting the training that you need. So I can't tell you how many teachers I talk to who feel like they are doing this and they are so not. Like, I think everybody needs to, it doesn't have to prepare, but everybody needs to be open.
So Tiffany,
because I was one of those people. Like, I was like, oh, I'm going to the Equity Network because I suggested it, but not because I need it. And I learned that I really didn't need it.
Yeah. So I agree. So Tiffany wrote down there and educate ourselves. Do you want to add?
Yep.
Tiffany, you want to?
Oh, yes, sure. Should we say educate ourselves instead of prepare ourselves? Yeah. Educating is way more.
Educate ourselves in order to confront I think that's great. That's good. I like that meaning. I just think you could prepare for a really long time and never do anything. So that's why I didn't like the word prepare, but I like educate.
That's been happening for decades.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then the other thing that I wondered was, I really do like that line, eliminate disparities in educational outcomes. And I wonder if adding it at the end of that sentence before it ends, so and racial inequities to bring about a more just society and eliminate disparities in educational outcomes. Is that too long of a thought? That might be a good place to put it.
What about in the third sentence, Tony?
JUHSD is committed to engage, educate, and empower all students. Oh, so in that sentence, yeah, it
At
could
the
go
end
there
of
too.
that sentence.
At the end.
Yeah, I just like that thought because that's really what we want to do. You know, we're schools, so.
I like that too. Also, Luca had a good comment there, and I think in that spirit and active, I'm gonna kind of plug the word proactive again. We can use it as an adverb, proactively engage, educate, and empower. I don't know if we need to use it, but if we do, I think there are other places to use it with the language we have here, because Kalima is right. Like, we have to make sure that we're reinforcing that we need to educate and be ahead of things, because if we're going to use this in the capacity that Dr. Gloria was saying, which we should, part of our board agenda, make sure it's stated there. When we're, just returning to that in our LCAP and the kind of things that we want this to be a visible vision or mission statement, kind of equity statement, then it would help to have that there. But
Yeah.
Nick, do you mean proactive? I like, when you said the word visible, we visibly embrace. I mean, that's more of a call to advocacy.
it is. I like the word visibility is good too. Although as a special education teacher, I think the word visibility also has, I'm just becoming more aware of those things.
Yeah.
I don't know honestly, if you're vision impaired, then visibility isn't the most inclusive word, but visibility is a great word in terms of marketing and optics, right? And all those things. And I think it would great here, but I do think proactive is a more universal word. Something like that would help, but we don't need to. I just think that I like that word in general. I am a fan, so that's me. But I think in the last sentence, because the strength of our statement up front with the shorter, impactful, concise statements as we're getting towards the end, if we want to add some words, then they will probably come later on, because these last few sentences can be more wordy, I think. So we're inclusive of all of these things. Visibility is a really good way to frame that, though, I think.
Yeah. I think we're all, the proactivity is us, right? I mean, I just think that we're concerned about using the word because we want it to happen. We just need to make it happen.
Right.
To Luca's point. Yeah.
I agree. The only reason why I suggested the word in the first place was because of like the connotations of like responsive. But now with the way it's phrased, there's nothing about like a reactionary approach.
Exactly.
But I also want to bring up another point. Is there a better word we can use than interrupts? Because I think interrupt carries like the connotation that you stop something temporarily, when I don't think that's our goal.
Do you have another word?
Means something like disrupt.
Disrupt?
I think he means ends. What's a better word than ends? Systematic or
No, interrupt. A better
Interrupt.
word.
Yeah.
No, but I think he wants something that's more final.
Right, we get it.
Yeah.
I'm saying, so I'm asking, is there a better word? And so Rosie was saying disrupt.
I like disrupt.
Or dismantle.
There we go.
Dismantle.
Oh, dismantle. There we go.
That's a good one. Who said that? Well done. Is it like
Rosie?
There we go.
I put it.
Nice suggestion, Luke. I mean, Mustafa, thank you. That's a better word.
Did I put dismantle in the wrong place?
We
It's
use
in two
interrupt
different
twice, so I guess we can put dismantle in the other place.
I was looking at the one above, so we used interrupts twice.
Yeah, and it's like essentially the same context too. So
So Do we want to?
I was thinking with injustice, maybe people say correct injustice, but I don't like correct because it reminds me of correctional, which is very legal incarceration aligned language. Even though it's also education aligned. Something other than disrupt though. Disrupting injustice doesn't mean it stops or.
So okay, so we're talking about the other interrupts, trying to find another word.
Yeah.
Okay, decision making reinforces or.
For this one right here.
Or maybe
we're
maybe
fine
there
with that one, right?
maybe interrupt is the like when you're making the decisions, and then the second sentence
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
how you're doing it, and then eventually it's to dismantle these things to have a more just society.
Okay.
Right.
Sounds good.
So interrupt is okay in the first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the other one, the question mark around actively, we embrace inclusion. Yeah.
I agree. I was really uncomfortable with actively in there.
Yeah.
And then I think here we educate I think we should separate these things, like we educate ourselves and we confront dismantle, because right now it just sounds like we educate ourselves in order to do these things, which then takes longer. But I think they both happen, they're always going to be happening at the same time. Or this will happen like on continuously. So maybe it's just like a comma.
You lost me, Tiffany. What do you?
So we respect disparate viewpoints, comma, educate ourselves and educate ourselves too, right?
Well, I was just thinking about the semantics of it. Does it sound like we educate ourselves in order to confront these things, which is true, but also wanting to call out educating ourselves happening like forever, like it's always going to be ongoing.
But I think we do educate ourselves to confront and dismantle.
Yeah, I think I can see it both ways, actually. I kind of like it with just a comma, respect disparate viewpoints, comma, educate ourselves and confront. But I think that the point was that we aren't just doing it, that we do need to educate ourselves in order to do it. Okay. Which would say leave it the way it is.
Or is the point that those things are necessary in order to confront and dismantle? I understand Tiffany's perspective. That you have to embrace confusion, you have to value diversity, you have to respect, you have to educate, you have to do all of that. And is that what you meant, Tiffany?
No, but I like the way that you clarified it.
Yeah, no, I like that too. And so could we just put in order to confront? So and educate ourselves in order to.
No.
Sorry, I think do what you were gonna do. I think the only thing we needed to do was add in order. So whatever at the beginning was fine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I understand.
And educate ourselves in order to confront dismantle. Okay, is that okay?
And the last thing I was going to say around respecting disparate viewpoints, do we just want to respect it or do we want to listen to it?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's think of another word for respect, maybe.
Consider.
Is listen not okay? Just say listen.
Listen.
Hear.
Well,
that's not a good word. Listen.
I don't know.
Are we going to consider it? I mean, we can listen to it, but are we really going to consider it? So
what's
you can
the issue? Oh, sorry.
Value.
Sorry, Rosie. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
Oh no.
No, I mean, because they're disparate viewpoints. Some we're going to agree with and some we're not. So we are listening and we're considering. So I think considering is the more proactive listening, right?
Consider.
So consider.
Yeah. It's much more active. Yeah.
I have a different association to consider. For me, it's like, oh, I'll consider your viewpoint and then I'll just.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm looking into a different.
So what was the issue with respect?
It seemed more passive for me. I was just like, oh, well, respect. It doesn't have anything connected to it. That could just be me.
I disagree. I think that currently right now, people don't know how to have like a civil conversation with others who have different opinions. So I think respecting, disparate opinions is important in trying to bring about positive change.
And I think especially when because this is really about our board role, that's what people are looking from us. Like that is
Yeah.
almost half the battle, if not more, is just people feel like they were respected and heard.
Yeah.
Which are one and the same. Like if you
Yeah.
just let people come and express their point of view at a board meeting and they feel like it was respected,
I agree.
they will. That's usually almost all the battle.
That's
So I think respect is good.
Right. And a lot of times it's that simple. It should be that simple, and it doesn't happen nearly enough where you just allow someone to express their point of view and respect that point of view.
Is it the adjective disparate that's maybe knocking this off kilter? I think we mean different viewpoints. Disparate almost sounds negative, but that might just be.
That's true.
Maybe it's maybe disparate is a thing. I think respecting, because it sounds like what you all are saying is like in having people come to board meetings is like you're listening to it. That's how you're respecting it, and it's almost like you're also inviting it.
Mm-hmm.
I think disparate just means different.
You want to use welcome?
Well, I don't know if I want to welcome. There could be some that are.
Well, but that's the whole point. That's fine,
But
you should
maybe we're getting caught up on disparate. Maybe we just say different, which is really what disparate is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say too.
Different.
Disparate can be like disparities too, right? They can be.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it can invoke that, or at least it can be read that way. Because I agree, disparate is used in many contexts, and I've used that in research.
How about all viewpoints?
Yeah, I mean that exactly. I mean, in terms of being civil and in terms of civil rights, right? This is one of those.
Yeah.
Speech. Okay. You do want to. We're a public, body. People are going to bring all of that.
Yeah, that's good.
I like that.
Our statement,
too.
Yeah, because our statement altogether addresses, social justice and civil rights and human rights. So I think that's strong. Respect. I think we have to reclaim that word in some ways, and sometimes this is one of those ways.
So I'm going to time check this. I think this is a really good start. I'm fine with, if there's any more comments or questions, we could send those on to you, Terry, or.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think this is good. And if we need to do anything else, we can email this out to the group. And if anyone has any more comments or questions, we can add it back, and then we could bring it back to the board meeting on the 5th to vote on adding it to everything. But we need we have a hard stop at noon, so.
I like that. I mean, Tony, maybe you and I can take a look at it one more time before and bring it to the October 6th meeting.
Right.
That's good. I think we did a great job of wordsmithing though to make it more our own. I think it looks really good.
Nicole's
and thank you to our students.
Nicole is really excited right now. I want to add one comment, and I promise I won't say anything else because I just appreciate your process. Very powerful, and just appreciate you all modeling what boards should be wrestling with, right? This is the process, this is the struggle, but it's also the commitment. And just appreciate you having your students, weigh in. One thing I do want you to think about as you continue to work on this, because it is a work in progress, and I recognize and respect that, is as you call out, that piece where you call out kind of underserved and racial inequities, that I wonder, will you consider calling out what some of those racial inequities are in terms of the groups of students you're referencing? And because in the data, it's pretty clear. So being committed to calling out those groups is what keeps that on the forefront of your work. And also, without apology, because there's going to be points where it's going to be uncomfortable, where you're going to use your statements, examine policies and practices, and call out where these inequities are happening. And when you put the word race, you're going to have to really unpack who are we referring to. But also because you put all students, I think it really speaks to the fact that we don't want to play oppression Olympics, right? And say like who's oppressed more than others, but you are going to get to a point where people are going to want to defer from talking about racial groups, and you're going to have to stay focused on that, right? Like that's going to be the hard piece to actually close an equity gap based on students' race. And remember, we talked about how this discussion will go into what the difference between race and ethnicity and calling out culture. But you're going to have to be really explicit in the long run, to really close those gaps that have been historical, as Kalima mentioned, historically and currently. So I just want to give you that thought for as you continue in the future. Do you feel, the need to call out some of those groups based on the data, which is not like it's just, this last year or the year before. Like these are historical inequities that have happened, and you have trend data over, decades and decades that you can probably call out. So that was the last piece I wanted to share, but really excited about the work you're doing.
May I ask you a question, Nicole? Are you wondering if we want to call out specific groups in this statement? I mean,
yes.
As part of the statement.
Yes, that's my question to think about. Do you want to do that? It's not something that's mandatory, but the challenge is, again, once you get down the road and use this statement to drive your work, if you don't have a laser focus on a particular racial group that you're trying to call out, then what happens, again, it starts to get watered down and kind of blurred, and you lose sense of what that, and the reason it gets watered down and blurred is because race is the one topic that is very difficult for people to address. So I love that you all talked about the education piece. We're going to educate ourselves as well, because the reality is that that's where the work stops because of talking about race. So if you don't call it out and actually say, hey, in discipline, we have, and you may even want to go into not only ethnicity, but gender, right? You may want to say our Latinx boys, right? You may want to say our African-American girls. You want to call out in like the discipline space. That might be what you're going to address, but there's so many spaces that also you don't know yet because you're going to continue to do your data dives and your research. So what you don't want to do is put yourself into a box and then miss also a key equity gap that you actually don't know yet because you have a lot of, work still to unpack. So it's just something to think about. And so hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't think we should put it in the statement, but I do think that underneath the statement, there could be action items that we're working on right now that specifically call out, what are we doing right now? And that's be an ongoing thing to make sure that, as Luca pointed out, that this is an actual real thing that's happening and not just words on the wall. So that we can have action items based on the work that we are going to do now and the work that we've done in the LCAP that says, we are currently looking at, because this is an ongoing issue, we are again on the disproportionate special education roles. That could be an action item that's called out here. We're looking at our proficiency rates in, this here, and here. I mean, I think that could be something that's called out and on documents. You're muted, Tony.
I think I just want to agree with you. I think having just been at the significant disproportionality meeting this week, we actually addressed this. I heard, it's the first time I've been part of that meeting, and I heard from others that it was the first time that people were actually really honest, and it was a really great meeting. But I see this, and to kind of follow with what Nicole's saying, there are very clear groups that we've got very different outcomes for. And for special education, for our African-American and Latinx communities, and also in just behavior stuff. So I think that we can really use this statement well in that group. Right. So, but I see it as sort of attached to it.
Just to make sure that we're always, because I hear what Nicole is saying, that you have to be specific so the whole district is on the same page about what this means, that when we have this statement in places, that the action items that we're working on to make this statement true are always connected with this statement.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, okay. And then I think behind racial, we need to add cultural. So racial and cultural inequity.
Yeah.
Moving on. Turning it back to Terry for the next part of the meeting.
Well, I want to recommend that we take a 10-minute stretch bio break. We've been sitting
Okay.
for a while. We have a really important thing to take on, and it's a big chunk of time. Is that
Can
okay?
we take 5 minutes?
Can everyone be back at 10:41?
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Do we have everybody? We're still waiting for a few people.
Thank you. I didn't even realize I needed a break, Terry, but I did.
It's hard to sit in front of a screen
know.
all day, really hard. And to stay engaged, that, you know, this is important work. We all have to participate. Nick and Carla, are you back?
They have a minute.
Sorry, everybody, I didn't look, I wasn't paying attention to the chat at all. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's fine. We were able to, there are other people that called the chat out.
Okay, all right, thank you for that.
Can we look into providing Luca a hotspot or anything that can boost his signal moving forward?
We have hotspots. Yeah. Luca, do you need a hotspot? Jake has ordered many of them.
Okay.
We have another 150 on the way, so
Oh, there you are, Jake. Yeah.
I'll be sure and
Because it'll help boost your, will it help boost his signal so that he can do audio and video? Because we want you to be able to hear your voice, because
yeah,
you have a lot of great stuff. I want to be able to hear
guarantee because they depend on cell range. So
okay.
As long as there's strong T-Mobile signal in his house, you should be fine.
Do you want to try it, Luca? Because where I'm at in Daly City, I needed one too to boost my signal so that I can participate. It takes up so much of your bandwidth to use video and audio. So, all right, cool. We'll see what we can do. Get it over to you. Let's try it out. See how it works. All right. Is that everybody?
We're waiting for Nick. Candace, are you there?
Yes, indeed, I'm here.
Thank you.
Just still eating my egg whites.
Good girl. Candace or Kalima, let me know when you want to start.
Okay. Is Nick there?
No, he's still not. He's
yeah. All right. Well, hopefully he joins in a few minutes. Go ahead, Dr. Deloria.
Okay, thank you. So I'm really excited that we were able to get that much work done on the equity statement. I'm just really proud of that work. Thank you for that. The next thing is to take a look at our equity policy. So I'm going to share my screen again with you. And I'm sorry, this doesn't look as nice as the one I probably emailed you because it just didn't convert to Google Docs very well, but it still gets the point across. So when we approve our equity policy, my recommendation is that we add that to the beginning of the CSBA policy that you already approved in June. And then I think we should make the policy our own. My recommendation would be for us to more specifically call out what equity looks like. And I think it's the teacher in me who needs to have some kind of a conceptual model in my head. Because sometimes when we talk about equity, we're only thinking about the teaching and learning part of it. And actually there's budget, there's facilities, there's human resources. So unless someone has another idea, and I'm not offended if you do, I thought it might be nice for each of us to think about how equity applies in at least these 4 lenses so we can capture that and add it to the policy that we already have adopted. And I'll just pause and listen to board members' comments on that. Does that sound like a good plan? Or even Nicole or Tiffany, anybody, if you think there's a better way to go about this, I'm open to that.
Yeah, this is Nicole. I think it's a great lens. I appreciate you seeing that, and prioritizing the work is what I'm always think about with policies, just helping boards to prioritize so you're not trying to do too much. The only thing I would say, you know, one priority to consider, and I don't want to add too many to you, but student discipline typically becomes one that's a priority. And so I wonder about, you know, where that fits in this conversation. I see your budget, obviously, facilities and HR and teaching and learning, but I'm wondering about maybe this discipline fall in the teaching and learning conversation as well. So just wanted to make sure, because I think it's important that when you use your policy to examine your decisions and weigh in on decisions that, you know, again, where do those, what are your priorities? So student discipline was the one piece that I was curious about, but I like your approach that you shared, Dr. Deloria.
So I think that's exactly where the discipline part goes, probably under teaching and learning. And those are the kinds of things I wanted us all to kind of brainstorm. I'm not just saying put these 4 titles in, but you know, as it relates to budget, what are the things we want to be mindful of in equity? When we talk about teaching and learning, these things, including student discipline. That's how I was thinking about that.
So the other box circle, whatever, that I added to mine was community climate, and that's all of us, the teachers and staff and our community. And I bring that up too because one of the big things that, you know, I don't know if we can focus on here because the amount of time, but rollout and how we roll these things out, and the plan and the process for rolling out.
Okay.
And
was it community culture? What did
I put climate.
Community.
And then also, you know, preparing for the clapback, and just, you know, that's just the term I use, but pushback to things that we do and how we respond. So that just fits in there in the community climate, like the plan and the process, the framework, and then, you know, responding, how we respond to different issues, explaining the why. I mean, I think that all fits in there.
There might be, it seems like there might be like with the framework that you proposed, Terry, these are like the focus areas in which equity or inequity exists. And then Kalima, what you're saying, it sounds like the how of how we implement or roll out equity practices, policies, changes.
Is that what you're talking about, Kalima, the how, or were you thinking adding another circle?
I wasn't thinking about adding another circle. I'm thinking all these things fit into the community climate circle. That we need to explain the why, that we need to have a how, like how, because that's all fits into the success of doing all the other things. I think it really leans on how our community is feeling about what we're doing and how successfully we are explaining the why, campaigning it, getting buy-in, having a plan that's fully developed and that is easy to understand. All these things kind of go into the community. How do we deal with pushback? Because that could derail a program immediately. We could do all these other things, bubbles really well, and then get immediate pushback and it shuts something down. So.
Okay. Did I?
Yeah.
I can keep adding. I'm going to be a note taker here, everyone. Okay. So, Kalima, if you don't mind, when you see people, if you would call on them. So if you have more to add either to the how part, or if you have some examples of things we need to consider when you think about equity when it relates to budget, what does that mean to you? Just so I can capture some notes. And then Tony, if you don't mind, if we can find some time before October 6th to kind of work up the policy and bring it back as a first read on October 6th, not an approval, but a first read.
And then for facilities, do we want to just put that in budget? what specifically are we going to do with the facilities?
Well, I think they're separate. So when I walk schools in the days when we used to be able to walk schools, I mean, it's really, you can see the differences in, say, science classrooms, or in the size of classrooms in general, or whether front offices are welcoming to families and community members. I see it a little bit different than the actual how we assign numbers in the budget.
Right. But I think that like all those things you mentioned to me aren't equity driven if you're looking at the statement. Right? How the front office, I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I first saw facilities, I was thinking like, oh, is the facility reflective of the students that are in the walls? But then to me, that also goes under teaching and learning.
Yeah, definitely the responsive classroom, I would agree, goes in teaching.
Right. So I don't know how much, like, to me, when I hear facilities and all our work around facilities has been like building out of facilities, modernization of facilities, but it's not really tied to social and cultural and racial justice.
I don't know that we've spent much time there, and I just see some real inequities for certain student groups.
May I interject? I think that you could probably lump a lot of things underneath subtopics, but I think there's value in kind of looking at them separately. And as Nicole stated at the beginning, discipline is, I mean, we are significantly disproportionate when it comes to discipline.
Right.
And so it honestly, Terry, I see why you saw that under teaching and learning, but that didn't come to my mind when I was thinking about teaching and learning. So I think it's a good idea to call things out separately, because this is just sort of our working document, right? To help us look at it. So I think that there's value in looking at them separately, even though budget, as you know, is like our moral document. Like what we do with our budget talks, it shows what we believe in.
I agree that, yeah. And so that's why I'm like, the things that need to be called out to a high level, I don't know if facilities is something that needs to be called out at this level. Should we absolutely be thinking about, Jeff, you know, our students, our schools in Daly City, and how they're modernized versus our schools in Pacifica? Absolutely. Like that's definitely needs to be something that we look at. But I don't know if it needs to be called out, facilities, and then we're not calling out student discipline is not at this level, which we know affects outcomes at a much higher level than facilities.
We can always remove it. It's a brainstorming document. So if we can't think of anything to put there, we'll remove it.
Why don't we just keep making these higher tiered areas and then the bullets underneath? And if there's things that we think about that don't fit under these categories, maybe they need another category.
Yeah.
Luca has some, I think he needs clarity from the chat.
Can you read his chat comment, please?
He said it's really about how you value your surroundings. And Andy asked for him to elaborate, and he said on the facility topic, we can try to make things equal, but it's unique for its own reasons. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what the goal for the facility factor is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with like that. That's kind of what my point too, is that, you know, equity around facilities is something that we should look at, but it's not at a level of some of these other things are. So, but yeah, we can move on to what we were doing and just adding other high level areas that we think we need to focus.
Because the only thing I could think of off the top of my head for facilities was the gender neutral bathrooms.
Yep.
Well, there's
yeah,
also
that's
like
the thing that I thought about too. That's
I
what
put
came
it
to
under,
my
yeah.
mind.
This is interesting because I also thought about accessibility, like, you know,
like ADA
Yeah, same here. I thought
compliance
of
and
ADA,
all that. Exactly.
ADA access and gender identity access, all that kind of stuff.
And then I just put safe, clean, well-maintained facilities for all schools, not just like the quote, quote, good schools.
That is true. I did some focus groups with students and they talked about the bathrooms.
Well, yeah, and the bathrooms, there are a lot of things that are an issue, but I'm just saying that's the bathrooms are not the thing. That's a universal issue. There's
Right.
not an equity issue around that.
So we can go for it, Nick.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh.
You go.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say, like, to speak to Luca's point, and I think we're talking about adding more areas. This framing around CSBA policy only has 4 areas, so it seems a little disjointed because it's not. I don't think we understand in terms of looking at policy. We think of a universal framework. We just did an equity statement that kind of looked at the global view of that. Now we're looking at just component parts. So I think unless, yeah, we're going to focus on just adding every different area we want to address in this. We're going to just get down to like specifics that lose some of that energy around, are we looking at the bigger picture? Because we only have facilities, budget, human resources, and teaching and learning, which they overlap a bit, but yeah, they seem kind of categorical in that sense. So that was my only point, but Tiffany, yeah.
I was going to say, to add to that point, I did some work with Thornton when we were starting to look at equity lenses at their school. And we identified 5 key areas for schools. It was discipline, attendance, teaching and learning in and outside of the classroom, student support services, and then family and community engagement.
Yeah, and I actually like those as the high level ones myself. And thinking about it,
I think human resources is really important though, because I think about staff, you know, like how do we retain staff? How do we support staff who have different needs? How do we address implicit bias or microaggressions among staff?
Yeah, and human resources is a huge thing too, because who's teaching, who's it needs to be a reflective of the community as well. So
do you want to start sharing our thinking? I know I wrote a lot of stuff in my boxes.
Yeah, actually, isn't this you can actually write in this document. Can you guys?
Yeah.
Can you make it a Google Doc, Terry?
It is. Oh, did I not share the right one with you?
I think it's in DocX form.
Just a second.
Yeah.
I think I shared the wrong one with you. Just a second.
Can you share? If you share it in the chat, we can add to it.
It just occurred to me now why you're not responding to some of the stuff I'm writing.
Oh, okay.
Can you see that? Sorry. So
I everybody.
Can you share the link?
I captured some of what Kalima said up here, and then down here is that 2x2 grid. So if something doesn't fit, just stick it up here in a list.
Okay. Are you going to share the Google Doc in the chat?
Is it not shared with you?
I don't know.
Or just the link to get to it really quick.
Give me a second.
If you just copy the URL and put it in the chat, we can.
No, it's okay. I'm going to share it with you it's in the folder. And I will stop the share.
Right.
So it's actually in the folder. So if you go in and open it up, you can start writing in it.
Okay. And, okay. So when thinking about all this, everybody can share, but to keep us out of the weeds, like how deep a dive do you want us to go into? How high level should we stay as a board? Because, we get constantly told about our roles and not to get too deep into the weeds. So I don't know. Go ahead.
You just want to go around and let everybody say one thing until we run out of stuff, and I'll just type it in so everybody hears it?
Sure.
Well, unless you have another idea.
No, sure. Let's keep.
Tony, can you unmute yourself?
Terry, what's the name of the folder that you put it in? Because I don't see it.
It's called Board Retreat 9/19/2020.
Thanks.
Tony, did you want to get us started with one thought you had?
Sure. So why don't I start with HR? I have include teachers of color in the or people of color in the hiring process, or diverse hiring committees. Hiring people that are reflective of our student body and our community.
Okay. All right, Klima, do you want to add something? Anywhere or outside of?
Who? Oh, I'm sorry. Was that me?
Yes, I'm just
Oh.
kind of going down by the people I see.
Oh, okay. And we're in human resources.
You can put it wherever you want.
Oh, okay. So I guess for teaching and learning, it was more getting buy-in, explaining the why.
Okay, Carla, you want to add something?
I put in the human resources hiring locally within the community.
Well, having our employee housing will really help a lot with that. That's for sure.
Right. And then also, yeah.
Good.
Anyway, also put widening recruitment to attract applicants of color. But I think the hiring locally is really important. I mean, yes, the housing definitely, but it definitely is nice to say like, oh, Riley's teacher lives like 2 blocks from us. He knows our neighborhood and, I mean, that really speaks volumes. So from personal experience, obviously. But
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tiffany, do you have something? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Policies to address implicit and explicit bias and discrimination.
That should be like a box on this, actually, probably. Thank you. That's a good one. Nick?
Yeah, actually, I think to kind of preface, piggybacking off of what Tiffany just said in terms of addressing implicit bias, decriminalizing petty drug-related offenses that are still being considered in our human resources processes, statewide and nationwide, obviously, but in education it is asked, at least in the state of California, unless there was a recent revision to that since last summer, that if anybody had been convicted of a cannabis-related offense, that they report that, even if it's out of state. And so something to the effect of decriminalizing petty drug-related offenses, which are reported in terms of our consideration of candidates for positions.
Misdemeanors. I don't know how demeanors.
Misdemeanors,
I spell that right? Oh, I think so.
Yeah, I think that's in terms of state law in California and the states where it's been decriminalized. What constitutes a felony? I don't know, that's a lot of cannabis, but I mean, it has been decriminalized. So what level, I think we should be consistent with however it's being decriminalized writ large. But yeah, I would imagine that's misdemeanors.
So I'm going to put this in here. I know that in HR, there's a lot of rules and regulations they have to follow. But in looking at applications, there could be someone who was guilty of a DUI 15 years ago. Is that the same thing as someone who was, is that where you're getting, or are you talking about never consider some of these?
Good question. I think the distinction between drugs and alcohol were considered drugs in other states still, right? Cannabis is not legal in every state, but for what it's worth, the decriminalization of cannabis globally. We're looking at entire countries, that have moved towards decriminalizing it. And so where it is only on a state-by-state basis here, when it comes to alcohol, I'm not sure what level of decriminalization or what level of discretion is applied towards those who have had a DUI. Although is that on our, I can't remember if that is part of the application for educational.
Yeah, Tony could address that.
Yeah.
Yeah, on our application, it does ask if they've ever been convicted of felony or misdemeanor. So what we do, and there are certain
I think we can take
crimes,
this
lack of a better way.
we're gonna have like extreme time issues if we dive into the weeds on each and every one of these things. So I think we need to just kind of list it, and then we can have the discussion about it afterwards. Otherwise, we're only gonna get one round.
You got it.
Sounds good.
All right, Andy.
Yeah, on HR, I would expand the recruiting more widely to attract staff of color, to actually specifically say we'll recruit at HBCUs and set aside, a couple of units for those of housing for those staff.
I'm sorry, I heard the recruiting expand more to staff of color, and then you bleeped out and I didn't hear the next part.
Oh, HBCUs, specifically at HBCUs.
I am not, can someone else help? I cannot hear what he's saying.
HBCUs.
Recruit at HBCUs. It's funny, Andy, I had that same one on my list.
HBCU. Yeah.
Historically Black
colleges and universities.
Colleges and universities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Views.
No, I'm getting there.
Sorry, I must have been a mush mouth. It's okay.
No, I've not heard. I couldn't connect HBC. That's
got it.
And the U.
HBCU. No, it's HBCU, not youths.
Yeah, there we go.
I've never heard of that before. So.
I had that on my list too, Andy. I think that's a great idea.
Cool.
Okay, good. Rosie.
So I just want to point it out that on the chat, Luca said also getting staff and teachers to understand where a majority of the students are coming from.
Right, and if we could, Rosie, if you could just stick to your part, and then we're going to call everybody, and we'll get to Luca.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wasn't sure if anyone was looking.
We got you.
So, I mean, so much of it's covered here, but I think budgeting for CTE, because not every student is going to go on to college. And I don't know if we can get more grants for CTE. I know we do pretty well there. But then also the use of student resource officer. Do we really need one on campus? Is it helping or hurting? Are we building a rapport with our Daly City health SRO, or is it making people uncomfortable, especially now?
Okay.
And then also the thing is with mandated reporters, I believe they have to first call the police and not, someone in a wellness capacity. And I don't know if we can get around that because it's the law, I believe. You would know that better than I would.
Actually, you can call child services. You don't have to go right to law enforcement. I would, I hope we're only calling law enforcement as a last resort when a situation is just so egregious to the student.
Yeah, child services can be as bad.
Oh, okay. Okay. Candace, is there something you want to add? Madeline?
Yeah. So I didn't have a chance to fully read the policy because of Wi-Fi issues yesterday. But I think representation in schools are really important. And for human resources, I also had recruiting teachers or staff of color and having diverse curriculums, but that might already be in the policy. And I was wondering if I could give a comment to the resource officer.
Yes.
So I actually had a conversation about this with a group of students in a program that I am a part of. And we had a discussion about whether it would benefit the students or make it a little more difficult, because I think some schools who have already considered it in California realized that the students weren't bonding with the officers and they were just kind of present in the school, which created some tension and a little anxiety in the students. And I think maybe a student survey would be good for this.
That's good feedback. Thanks, Madeline. And I think I captured, so I put down in the teaching and learning box, culturally responsive curriculum, but I see this as different, culturally reflective classrooms. So what you see in the classroom versus what the teacher's teaching.
And I wrote, students should see themselves in the curriculum, which is kind of, you know, reflected in those, but maybe a shade different.
Okay, Mustafa?
For human resources, I was thinking mental health resources that are accessible to like also like low income students and staff. And also maybe like restorative justice like resources.
Do you want that in human resources or do you want that in budget? Or in teaching and learning? It actually fits in all those places.
I don't know. Decide. I guess budget maybe. I mean, it does overlap as you've stated. So.
Yeah. I'll add it in both of those places. Luca. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicole.
Sorry, I just placed in the chat, just one piece. I'm not sure if you all will be able to tackle all this today, so I didn't want to overwhelm, but I just placed a couple of thoughts for the hiring piece. In kind of 4 buckets of like the process of hiring, because I can see you all probably having another study session just for hiring, like probably for all of these, of course.
Yeah.
But just like having a framework for hiring is going to be important, I think. And so even like how that looks, because governance obviously oversees the framework, doesn't necessarily hire people, obviously approves hires, but doesn't, necessarily hire people, do the process. I think considering that framework. So I just gave you 4 buckets to think about, just obviously recruitment, the actual hiring, retention, and then also evaluation. And I think there's all equity lens can be blended for all of those. I just didn't go into details because I think it's, there's a lot to unpack with each of those, the interview process and the questions you ask, and make sure you ask questions that yield culturally proficient responses or not, right? So things like that, it's just, I think you're going to end up going in the weeds. So I don't want to give too much, but I'll just offer that one for this session for the HR piece, if that helps. And I put it in the chat, by the way, so you can maybe copy and paste and we can wordsmith later.
Jake, if you can hear me, can you make sure to save the chat in case I forget to do that? All right, Luca.
We can just, Luca, you want to type something else in the comments, but as Rosie had stated earlier, Luca also had an earlier comment about getting staff and teachers that understand where a majority of our students are coming from.
Can you tell me more what you mean by where they're coming from? Do you mean culturally from when they're coming from, or?
Joe, so it's not enough to hire someone just because they're a person of color if they don't understand the community and the community of Daly City, the community of Pacifica or Brisbane or Como don't understand the culture and the climate of the surrounding neighborhood of the school district. So it's not just enough to be a person of color, but you also need to understand the culture of the school and the culture of the community.
No, I like that. Thank you. All right, I guess we'll go back up to the top.
And then hold on one second. And Lucas said, and the struggle that most of the students deal with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, Luca. That was a very important point.
That was a good one. All right, Tony, back to you.
Oh my gosh, I have so many things in all of these boxes. I want to just sort of second the buckets that Nicole referred to, because I've got things all in all of those buckets, but I am cognizant of not wanting to get too much in the weeds, but I think, so I'm going to leave HR.
Can I just say, like, before we do another round, because I think we are going to get, like, this is going to lead us into the weeds, and we're going to need like a study session on each one of these things. And so I'm wondering if we just want to secure what each one of these things are. Like, what are the things that we need to have a study session on, and then go into pulling out what we want to discuss in each of those study sessions. And then also have a discussion about the framework of this work and how all of the things are connected, because that is what an area that I'm still confused on. You know, how does Nicole fit it with the work we're doing? Nicole fit in with the work that Tiffany's doing and Circle Up are doing? How does what is the goal for Circle Up?
Okay. Should we stop this then?
I think that means going back and confirming those bubbles. Like, do we just want to have those 4 bubbles or the 6 bubbles? Because the bubbles will determine what we're identifying, measuring.
So I thought we were just listing things right now. I know that some of us digress, but I thought we were just listing without going into the weeds. And so I don't know if Tony had a chance to include hers. Did you? Or were you about to, Tony?
Tony went first.
Oh,
yeah, I can, you know, share my document or add to all the boxes. I have a bunch of things on all the boxes. So I was amplifying what Nicole said earlier. Like, of course, I'm sort of honed in on human resources right now. So, you know, I have a lot of thinking about that. So I'm not sure the best way to do it, actually. I think it's maybe a good idea to decide how we're gonna, so thank you, Rosie, because I do have a lot of thoughts, but I think that it might be a good idea to decide the bigger bubbles and what we wanna work on more. Because I think that certainly our work with Nicole, our work with Tiffany, we wanna make sure that's reflected in here and how, and what we're gonna be doing with them. And I think budget kind of is the umbrella that a lot of the stuff can go under. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we all want to share all of our bullet points right now to make sure that nobody's are lost. Do we want to just
is there a way
type on it?
Right. Is there a way that we can always share all our bullet points so none of these are lost? We could just email them and we can put them into a document.
Right.
But that doesn't need to happen right here for that to happen. But we're not all in the same space at the same time. And I don't want us to move or leave this space without having a discussion about how do we do this work? And I still don't know if we've answered that question, and really focusing on what are the priorities of this work. And I think that the initial 4 priorities that were given in budget, human resources, facilities, and teaching and learning were a good starting space. But I think a lot of this came out of getting a real equity statement that got me rethinking about how, you know, what we need to be looking at and what we need to be focused on. So going through that mental process of like reshaping my brain, of going through the equity statement work, when I looked at the work of the 4 subgroups, I was like, we need to maybe rethink the subgroups and think about what we make a priority in relation to that equity statement, and then go through the lists.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would think too, yes, that in terms of just reframing how we organize the information, are we going to do that right now? Are we going to look at adding more of those categories, or are we just simply moving on to another piece of
I
what
think like we have 30 minutes right now. If we just want to, because even looking at, even hearing what everybody is saying in regards to the different buckets that we have determined are important right now, I'm like, wow, each of those things could be a whole different work study. So maybe we can spend the rest of the time focusing on what are the buckets, what are the individual subgroups or buckets, however we want to call this, that we really feel are priorities. So then the next piece of this will be having work studies on each one of those to have a separate discussion. So evidently, from looking at how many comments have been in human resources, we know for sure human resources needs to be one, right? And then what else do we think needs to be at that high level, and especially thinking about urgency that we should really start focusing on this year? That would be at the same level of human resources.
So I added a number 4 to the agenda. I mean, everybody, and I can send it out to everybody. Everybody can add to that document we were just working on. So I agree, we don't have to spend all that time. So I'll send the link in case you can't find it. But then I added number 4, priorities, and human resources is definitely one of them. So I'm just gonna take notes while all of you talk. I'll try to.
I would like to add budget to that.
If we're talking about this year, I would actually just stop there, because that's a lot already. You know, I mean, given what's under HR, and we know what's under budget, and the fact that it's all, and budget will always be something we have to be focused on. So, you know, but it is us retraining ourselves to look at the budget through this lens. You know, I mean, we're already starting to do it, but we all have growth in that area to really look at it lens. And so I think if we'd actually just made these two things a focus, then I think we could make some significant headway.
So if I can, I'd like to add to that. It would be much easier for Tony to develop superintendent goals and goals for her executive cabinet and principals. I think there's still work that can be done in teaching and learning. It's not necessarily the work that the board has to do, but if you have a vision for something that's a priority in teaching and learning, that's something that Tony can set as a goal with Corrine and her team and the principals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, that does make sense.
But that's
how much in teaching and learning? Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm wondering, what am I trying to say? The equity work in teaching and learning, I absolutely agree, are a priority. In looking at it in the COVID lens, like how is what is the framework? I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No, I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, okay. So these are equity teaching and learning, but since it's this year and we're talking about superintendent's goals for this year, it's also underneath the equity around at-home learning in COVID. So I don't know, like, do you know what I mean? Like, is it teaching and learning, or is it, because teaching and learning to me is stuff that is ongoing, like ongoing goals, or if we're talking about this year, is it a focus on what are the goals for, I think, you know what, it's fine. Superintendent goals just threw my thinking off. We're good. It's fine. I'll think about it.
I mean, for example, you can't do everything under teaching and learning, but one thing you could be working on is making sure that the curriculum more accurately, the students can see themselves in the curriculum. And we've done some of that work already.
Right.
That doesn't have to be on pause if that was a priority for you. I mean,
no, it's fine. It's just, no, it's fine. It's just, I agree with you. It's just when I started thinking about superintendent's goals for this year, it totally threw my thinking off. But no, I'm going to go back to the higher level thinking. And yeah, teaching and learning is fine.
I hope I didn't talk you into it. It's okay to disagree with me.
No. It was just I needed to. It was my fault. I just allowed I went to another place instead of staying in where I wanted. We should stay at a high level.
And that makes sense, Terry, because, you know, since we broached the topic of grading just a few weeks back,
Right.
It makes sense to have that larger area.
I would also say that again, one of the priorities I think is that we need to, the framework of the equity work and the plan, what is a plan, overall how we do the rollout needs to be discussed, how everything fits in, how they're
That's
all
right.
connected.
Yeah, I think it's important to identify these priorities, but they're also really broad. You know, I think you need the framework first to know how you're thinking about it, because like the 4 areas, teaching and learning, you can't just say, oh, we're going to focus on teaching and learning, because is that grading? Is it attendance? Is it discipline? I think it's almost helpful to, you know, like as the board, you all set the direction to have that clear, not only the equity statement, but also where and how it lives, which is those bubbles and categories. And then underneath that, really defining how is equity or inequity living in each of these areas. Like within facilities, facilities is hard, but like, I don't know, teaching and learning, there's discipline, there's curriculum, there's, I don't know, grading. And so then you can be able to identify, you know, 2 or 3, which is like the really difficult ones to, you know, really have laser focused priorities for the year.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to define and identify those areas first.
I think that's why I was going to listing, because you can't do everything. So if we could get everybody's thoughts about equity in these areas, there's a way to narrow it down and prioritize, decide what has to be done first.
Thank you for clarifying. Just to make a point, that's kind of what I was asking earlier too, is these aren't obviously all areas of education completely in a comprehensive sense. Are we still going to name all the different buckets we want to look at, or do we just want to narrow it to these 4? Because this is the CSBA framework that we're working with. And if so, should we go back to what Rosie was saying and just list whatever we've got? Or what Kalima, what you were saying, should we just email those later? Because we only have about 30 minutes left.
Well, I think I can send you that list. I think that executive cabinet needs to look at those lists too. There may be some things that we're not thinking of. But I do think, to Kalima's point, we do need to talk about Nicole and Tiffany's work and how that's going to work.
Education Trust West work.
And I would also say our equity task force.
And our equity task force, absolutely. Yeah. And how do we get all of these things on the same page? So that when we do decide what the 4 buckets are and list the priorities for each of those buckets, everybody understands where their place is and who should be handling that work. Because right now, if we listed out the buckets, I'm not sure what Tiffany would handle. I'm not sure what we already discussed with Ed Trust West and where that already has been addressed, and then we just put it on pause because we're getting everything else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do we utilize and use the equity task force to help us with all of these things? What is the flow and process? Like, we're here today deciding all these things. Do they then go to the equity task force to talk about and ruminate and then bring it back to us? Like, what is that process look like?
Tony, what are your thoughts, since soon you'll be leading these conversations?
I think that those are really good points, Kalima. I think we need to decide what we want to do. I think that the equity task force is a really important group. They've been working on this, so I definitely think they need to be involved in this. And I also think the executive cabinet, and I hear you on Ed Trust West. There's so many things that have happened, and the SIGDIS committee. I mean, there are so many people kind of working on the same stuff at the same time, and we definitely want everybody to we want to include all those thoughts. So I think that, and I'm thinking of, if we're going to be amending this board policy before October 6th, I don't actually think that's enough time to have all of the thoughts before we amend our policy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from here, I would bring it maybe to executive cabinet, and I think definitely the equity committee and CIS are two big ones that needs to go to next.
This is Nicole. Can y'all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, Tony, you sound like a robot on my end, so I'm not sure if it's me or my phone. But,
No, it was everybody. I can understand.
Okay,
what
okay.
you're saying,
I
yeah.
thought my phone was going out. So just real quick, I want to acknowledge again the process, the struggle, the progress you're making as a team. And to remind you, you know, when, again, this work, the reason why we call it messy work is because this is part of the process to even establish a vision and a guide for how the work is going to be laid out. So while I know like that you want to get, you know, into the weeds, and I know that that's really something that's going to have to happen. Obviously, that's what study sessions are for. But I want to remind you about the board in particular needs to be able to prioritize the work. So having about 4 buckets is typically a good idea, because once you get beyond that, it's hard to manage that. And so you want to be good. You want to be laser focused at closing an equity gap. And so I think that if you don't get laser focused on that, what'll happen is you'll do a lot of things and then do nothing. And so we want to make sure that you not only prioritize the work, but also you provide kind of a vision and a guide for how it's going to be implemented, which is where superintendent, right, and designees come in. And then of course, there's still a lot of unknowns. So as you're planning on how you're going to address those priorities, there's some research, right? There's some data analysis. There's some things you still have to unpack that you may not be aware of. And you've already started that work. You've done the community listening sessions. You have, you know, work that's been done where Tiffany said, we're getting feedback from kids. So that work continues, and obviously using your task force and using, you know, all the different voices to be a part of this work is important. But I think right now, for the use of your time, you're actually doing great. Like you have prioritized, you're wrestling with what are our priorities? Because if you don't have priorities, you'll be all over the place. And then you can go into the weeds of something that is very important, is having a hiring framework. Boards, your role as a board is to have a framework for how hiring looks, right? Personnel looks. And there's some documents, you can talk about this in another, you know, study session. But the reality is that you want to create the vision, the guidance for the work that's going to be done at each level in the system. And so I think you're all on a great track. So if you were whipping around, just making sure everybody weighs in on the call of, are these our priorities? I think is what you want to end with, right? Is, these, do we all agree these are our priorities? And that would be something I'd recommend.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Just some thoughts here.
Hold on. Andy, go ahead, and then I'll get back to you, Tony.
So from my perspective, actually, everything flows out of the budget. That's where we begin, the budget / LCAP, right? And frankly, I think that's actually the overarching piece, because then the rest of it flows out of HR, teaching and learning, facilities, community climate, that sort of thing, right? This is both a top-down and bottoms-up exercise. Staff needs to work and identify what are the strengths of Nicole's work, Tiffany's work, Ed Trust West, et cetera, where they fit into the equity work of it, and to recommend how it bubbles up. While we as a board are saying, okay, I want to focus on hiring more staff of color, and I want to focus on grading policy. So how then do we align the work of Nicole and Tiffany, et cetera, to fit those areas in those budgets? That's the way I think we need to prioritize it. And that actually then leads into superintendent goals.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yep. Yeah. Anyone else?
Nick.
I like what you said, Andy.
Sorry, Tony, you were next. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, go ahead.
Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was kind of grappling, listening to what Patty saying. And I was like, okay, Nicole, so help me to conceptualize, you know, how to best go about it. But I like what you said, Andy. That makes good sense.
Yeah.
I mean, is there any way you could hop off and hop back on? Because I think there's something wrong with maybe the microphone.
Audio, Tony.
Or connect and disconnect to your audio, Tony.
Yeah, I think my new laptop audio is all messed up. I'm gonna go away and come back.
I was just going to add, Andy, thank you for providing that framework. It's, I think, exactly the way to kind of crystallize. I guess my last question on that note is, like Rosie was referencing earlier, are we gonna do a last whip around, or should we just type it into these boxes? Because I have a couple that I know are missing that I really want to include, but I don't want to jump back into it if we're not going around again.
Well, I think that we can email out to everybody the new buckets, and then you can include your list of things in the new buckets so that we capture all of those things. If we could scroll back down to the.
Did we agree on the new buckets?
Right, and so that's the new buckets are where are they? Where
Your 4
Some of the
frameworks.
Oh, the
different-
4 framework. Oh,
different
you
documents.
moved them under budget and LCAP. I don't know if I don't like that we moved everything underneath. Oh, I see we moved it underneath the LCAP, so that's why it's budget. Can we just call it LCAP and not budget LCAP? Because it's budget twice. Is you
That's
saying
fine.
something, Andy?
He's all happy.
No, I'm agreeing with the new framework as Terry's been typing it.
Yeah, I still say I would prefer that we remove facilities. I just don't see that as a priority that we need to focus on immediately. Not saying that we can't work on facilities, and we're doing, if the bond passes, there'll be facility work that needs to be done, and we can definitely talk about ADA and things like that. But is it up there with the grading policy and discipline? For me, no.
Well, I think there's two things. There's one is identifying priorities and identifying the buckets. And then the second one is priorities from those buckets.
But I think we're saying that out of each of these buckets, we're going to do a work study and focus on, and then out of those are going to come goals. And we're trying to pick up to 4 to 5. And I don't know if facilities is one of those that need to be up there right now.
I'll offer, I know this came up a couple of times and I apologize. I think in the very beginning, when you were doing your statement, I used facilities as an example and didn't realize that this would come up. But I just want to say, when you think about how do you measure the impact of your work, that's why you got to prioritize it. Because if you say something like facilities, again, it's not to say facilities is not important, but if you can't measure how facilities impacts your big picture, which is student achievement, then I'm not sure you want to prioritize facilities. I think what you do want to do is when you pass a bond measure, you want to bring your equity statement back out and really talk about how do we ensure that equity is happening for our students based on what we said equity is in the context of facilities. And so that's about building schools, if that's about refurbishing schools, if it's about, consolidation, closure, whatever school, whatever you have to do around facilities, you want to have your equity lens applied to it. But I don't know if that's a board priority. And I want to say it again, a board priority, that every time you are making decisions, every time you are bringing things on your agenda, that it falls under those categories so that you can stay laser focused on your work. I think that's why, facilities was a great conversation. But I'm just not sure it's a board priority when you look at the big picture, because there are so many nuances that you're going to have to oversee. And a big one is teaching and learning. And if, again, facilities, student nutrition, you can go through all the things that affect teaching and learning. Those fall under that kind of bucket is what my opinion is. And I just want to say that. And then I appreciate you calling out community climate in particular. I think of it as school climate. Student discipline probably falls under there, which is what I heard you say. And those are all the things that, again, impact student achievement when you talk about what is your big picture. You want to close equity gaps in Jefferson Union High School District.
No, this is great. I like the way that you're breaking this out, Terry, and this is helpful.
Thank you.
Maybe one of the priorities I heard you say, Kalima, was also creating a framework for how equity work is done or monitored.
This is hopefully the basis of the framework, but I think that needs to be like the first thing we figure out is this discussion right here is how do we go about doing this work? And I know like each of us has areas that we want to focus on, because I have a ton that I want to list to Nick's point. but I've had those for years, right? Nick, you can speak to it. You've had those for years. We've all been discussing them for a long time. All these things on the list, this is not the first time we've said these things out loud. I think the problem has been we've never put a policy or practice into place on how we effectively get all of this stuff done. And that's what I would like us to spend a lot, like can that be the first thing we do so that we don't have to keep listing these things out repeatedly over and over again?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say that listed as like 1, 2, and 4, not necessarily in that order, I'm guessing too, right? Because these are different buckets.
Yep.
Listed on paper, right? So yeah, maybe even just noting that like these are taking equal priority, or if we're gonna actually prioritize them within that, then to note that as well. But yeah, absolutely. There's a list I think we all have, and yeah, just for the sake of time, because we are 15 minutes to the end. Yeah.
Don't take my lack of conversation meaning I don't like or understand or support. I'm just trying to think of where to put it here, Klima. That's all.
The framework?
Yeah, I mean, right.
It's on the top. Like it says framework. I feel like it should stay above everything. Like the framework. Yeah.
Okay.
And we could just call it out. Who leads this work? Should we call this board priorities? I think it should be more of the framework is really how do we get this done? All the stuff that we're going to have underneath it. How do we go about doing it effectively?
The flow of the work, you mean? Like
that's part of it. I think the flow of the work, determining how we develop these, like one of these things, like this session is how we're developing priorities. But once we develop those priorities, then what? So you're saying the flow, how it goes back and forth, who has input, when should we be asking for input, and when should we be going to the stakeholders, and when, how does it get vetted? And then also all of our resources, how do all our resources fit in, and how do we best utilize our resources in each parts of this work? Like getting that understood. What is buy-in? Because before I've had, and we know other people have had discussions about when do we roll things out in terms of climate and community. Jefferson had the benchmark of they needed to have a certain amount of teachers buy into something before they implemented something school-wide. Should we have something like that district-wide? So, and then my last point was going to be timeline, but Nicole also put in the chat, like, what's the timeline for all of these things? And how do they all fit in with each other? Because I feel like things just come, like we're working on grading policy, we're working on this. How do they all fit in? How do they all connect? Like having that level of understanding that could be, we all understand and can communicate out. So it's, that's the equity plan.
I was going to say the same thing, Terry, like what you wrote, process map, like a roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
Because it sounds like the priorities is like creating a framework with a process map, roles, timelines, the how, and there's also
and the why.
And the why, and then there's also the priorities that happen. That's part of the priorities too, in the ones that you named underneath these.
Right. Oh, and Nicole also put and the metrics. The E is the underneath communications and metrics. Yeah.
Hey, that's a lot. Got a lot done today.
Yeah.
I would suggest that maybe we take a break from this, take a pause. I do have a final reflection there so that we have a way of saying goodbye today. Unless there's something else, Klima, you want to do, I was going to go to the final reflection.
Nope, that sounds great. I mean, the only other thing is if we all have access to this document, and I don't know if we want to do it in this doc, what I was going to do is I was just going to copy and paste this whole thing into another document and then just start adding my thoughts for the whole, this whole framework thing. and just start adding my thoughts to each of part of this, and then we could come back maybe at our next work study to discuss those. So it includes the buckets, but it also includes everything else.
So, you know, if this is the board's work, I'm wondering if you shouldn't allocate a part of every regular meeting to this work.
Absolutely, and that's definitely should be the discussion. I mean, I've seen other boards reframe their agenda to reflect the bucket. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. And I also want to say, Kalima, that's a great idea. Oftentimes when Monica, Casey, and I are working on bargaining stuff, we get to a place, then we make a copy, and then we add all of our stuff, and then we come back together.
Yeah.
So it's a really good way to do it. So you don't lose this and change this, but you can add your own.
Right. And it doesn't get too crazy with everybody adding comments to one doc, which might be a lot. Yeah.
Candace, can you remind us when our next retreat is?
Let me look and see.
Okay, while she's looking, here is our final reflection. What was one idea or comment that you heard today that will stay with you for some time? Think about that a little bit. Something that you heard or thought about today that'll stay with you for some time, and why? So you get 2 sentences. What is it and why? No paragraphs. And I'll get started, then I'll pick on somebody. I don't mean I'll pick on somebody, but I'll pick somebody. An idea that really I'm really impressed today by the way people jumped in on that equity statement. I'm really proud of that work. Well done. And it's going to be a long time before I forget that work. And I am going to call on Carla.
Of course you are. I was just actually going to look and say the equity statement. I was like looking like, okay, I'm looking at it. But yes, I think that has really made a big impact about like where we're at and what we want to do and where we want to go. And this is really like this is our stand on what we believe in. So I'm really excited about that. And, you know, and I'm glad that we're going to always continue this work because I think that it's, you know, never going to be done. So that's it. Thank you.
Andy?
So I'm going to do 2 because Rosie texted me since she's in the car. So let me share Rosie's first, which is understanding where students are because we can't ever lose sight of that. And I will actually add to that. I was very impressed with the way our student trustees contributed to the equity statement and helped push the discussion along. And I will always enjoy the input of our students.
Thank you. Madeline?
I think something that stuck with me today was the fact that changing just one word in the equity statement did so much to how strong the statement was. And I think that was really cool to watch.
Thank you. Agreed. Luca? Yeah, agreed.
He said everything. Because it was all good mental process.
It was. I'm going to need a nap after this from all the thinking. You're right, Luca, about that. Tony.
I actually want to echo what Andy said earlier and Rosie about the students. There wasn't one concept that stood out. I think it was all a good conversation, but I haven't had a chance to work with our students so closely, and I'm just really heartened. I'm happy for the future, for our future, because they were really thoughtful comments that they made. So I was really glad to have them part of this.
Thank you. Tiffany?
Writing historical and current inequities, that was really powerful for me. And just to see that we were all on the same page about it, students and the adults. Yeah, it's powerful.
That's how you know the district's in good shape moving forward, because of the agreement on that. I agree. Mustafa?
A lot of things stood out to me, but I think the main thing was how much work goes into an equity statement. Like it's one, or like there's multiple sentences, but like it's one statement, but it's like it guides your whole process in thinking, like how you think.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, yeah, there's so many things today, but if I had to pick one, I would go back to the word proactive. Not just to say that, because I like that word. I do use it often, actually, still. I feel like we should reclaim it. But also to speak to the point, you know, we're talking about action, right? Not just words, right, but action, and using the active voice versus the passive voice. I mean, when you think about the state of like office politics in many places, right, having hard discussions, those often revolve around passive aggressive behavior, because people want to confront things, but then like in a nice way. But being polite isn't always being political. Being political, this is what we're engaging through education right now as a national and global narrative. And so I think when you think about action and being proactive, like a lot of language we're using is civil rights and human rights language from the United Nations to right here in the US through affirmative action, affirming things and taking action in a positive direction. It's literally on the ballot. Again, we're looking to repeal or not, right? Depending on how people want to vote. But in terms of the movement to repeal Proposition 209, I think it's a major statement as a state of California, and of course in education and employment, for us to think about that kind of language. And so proactive is a very positive place to start, because it engages things, and that's where we begin to confront and address and redress those inequities. So I'll leave it there, but yes, that's what I'm kind of, it resonates with me.
Nicole?
Yeah, I think the word that resonates with me is just, I appreciate the intentionality. I think that's big, that I don't feel like this work is being done in a knee-jerk response or in any way that's not authentic. So I think maybe those are two words now, authentic and intentional, really kind of resonates with me, and just really appreciate and honored, you know, I'm proud to be a part of the work with you and support it. So those would stick out to me.
Thank you. And Kalima, I'm going to let you have the last word and take us home.
Tony, I agree with what you just put in the chat. Okay, so yesterday was a rough day for me because Ruth Bader Ginsburg is like, I worship her almost. She's one of my idols, and kind of drives how I live my life. People ask like, why do you do all the things you do? And I'm like, because Ruth Bader Ginsburg did all the things that she did, right? And so her passing yesterday was scary, scary for a lot of people. Like, what do we have to look forward to as a nation? And it threw me off. But today has been so healing, and just getting through that equity statement and talking this all out through the members of my board, and, you know, hearing the discussion. Like, this is the society that I want to live in. So I am just internally grateful to everyone on the Zoom and the call that we had. And it's not easy work, and we are going to get frustrated with each other, and it is going to be challenging, because anything worthwhile is. And this is not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of steps and process. But to see the level of commitment from everyone, including our students, into getting this right, that's amazing. So I am just extremely grateful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Kalima. And Tony, maybe you and I can talk a little more on Monday, kind of firm up next steps. Okay. All right, everybody. We're 5 minutes early. What will you do with the gift of time? 5 minutes.
Look at that. And let's just note it, man, because I know sometimes with me, meetings just go on forever, but I'm like, we ended early.
But it is a board meeting, and Candace would want to know, what time did we adjourn? Was there a first? Was there a second? Was there a vote?
Oh, wait, don't adjourn. Hold tight. Just one thing. Just to answer your question, Dr. D, the next scheduled board meeting is in November. I put it in the chat. I think I put November 14th, which is a Saturday. However, if you guys would like to schedule one for October, Nicole is available October the 3rd. So I'll be sending everyone an email to see, check on their availability. I know I will not be available, but I will send an email to everyone. Is that okay?
And thank you, Nicole, for joining us today. This is how much she loves us. On her free time on Saturday, she decided to hop on to our.
Of course. Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't join in video. I normally always do. But the children are present, and I've been locked in my office all week and in Zoom. So I promised I would kind of try to be present so they don't burn the house down while I'm locked in the office again. So, but appreciate you all.
No worries.
Thank you to Tiffany too for being here. Sorry.
Absolutely. Andy, were you unmuted? Were you going to say something?
No, actually, that was an accident that I unmuted myself. But since I am unmuted, no, just thank you. I'm really just grateful for this. This was actually a really good day, and I, you know, it was a difficult week work-wise and with some other stuff going on. And so this was a good session, because this is where we do make a difference. This is where we change the world right here, and it starts with our 4,300 students.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.